In Season 1 of Scene of the Crime, we explored the tragic 2017 double murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German in Delphi, Indiana. Now, Season 2 is upon us, and we are digging into another double murder. But this time around, the victims and circumstances couldn't be more different. Roger Atkinson and Rose Burkert were brutally murdered in their hotel room at the Amana Holiday Inn in Williamsburg, Iowa in September of 1980. The hotel was filled to capacity on account of a mortician's convention, and the doomed pair almost didn't get a room. Fortuitously, due to a last-second cancellation, the couple was assigned room 260. But their happy getaway ended in tragedy, and a killer wielding a heavy-bladed weapon, most likely a hatchet, would ensure that Roger and Rose didn't leave the hotel alive. As investigators began to investigate the carnage and bloody crime scene in room 260, looking for the killer or killers, they soon realized that there was no shortage of secrets. There was also no shortage of suspects, including angry exes, jealous spouses, twisted relatives, and multiple serial killers. This case plays out like a work of crime fiction, but sadly, this is a true story, one that remains unsolved. We have been given unprecedented access to police files and records, family and friends of the victims, and the insight of members of law enforcement who worked for years to solve this horrific murder. Join us starting October 14th of 2020 as we kick off Season 2 of Scene of the Crime. Search for and subscribe to Scene of the Crime right now so you don't miss a single moment. In the meantime, give a listen to this preview of what's coming up in Season 2 of Scene of the Crime.
Sometimes you do have to keep things back, and we've had cases where that was necessary, but let's look at this. This happened in 1980. Some of the information was kept very close early on and understandable, but that didn't work. Now we're to the point where we're really looking at anything that can help break this case. And so we've tried it that way for many years, and now we're putting everything out there. There's really very little that we won't talk about because a lot of people still care about this case. There's still family members and friends that are still victimized by this case.
260 was the room number. Somebody wanted to know about that room, and I said, I will go in and check it. I opened up the door, and the light wouldn't go on at the door. So I walked in and going to reach at the desk to turn the light on. I looked over and saw, I walked right next door and called the front desk and told them, I think they're dead. I couldn't stay home alone for quite a while after that.
Yeah, the room is pretty much in disarray. It looks like the perpetrator's gone through like the billfold and the luggage and whatever and strewn things around. The two victims are in the bed. Roger, he is face down. He's wearing brief underwear. And then Rose is face up, but she's completely covered with the bedding. There's quite a bit of blood. There's blood on the ceiling and walls. The linens, of course, are soaked in blood. The damage to the skulls was, while not completely superficial, there's a lot of superficial injuries, but there's also injuries that involve the impact in the skull and the fracturing of the skull.
When we drove up the driveway, here we saw flashing lights, the sheriff's car, and it's then when the sheriff told us that there was a homicide. I went down and identified Roger.
I'm not sure who told us, but I know they did talk about a machete. It could have been a hatchet. It could have been an axe.
Well, we learned that this is a lover's getaway weekend.
Just that he was obsessive and trying to be controlling and, just a clinging vine.
When I heard that she was killed, he was the first person that came to my mind. And everybody thought everybody did it.
Even the detectives had their own personal feelings about who, what, when, where, and why. It just always been a muddle. There were a lot of silly circumstances that made it difficult to take and decide whether or not, yes, it was somebody that we didn't know or somebody we did know.
Everybody was scared to death, even at the funeral. You could tell. If I could just find out who it would probably tell me why.
It wasn't a forced entry. So one of them, Rose or Roger, evidently knew or recognized whoever was at the door, and they let them in. We're very confident that the person knew them.
This case has got all kinds of twists.
There's something odd about this crime scene, about this offender's behavior. What is going on here? There are active serial killers, but they're rare.
I just thought it was really odd behavior. Uncle on my dad's side was a serial killer, and he was in Iowa, I think they thought at the time.
They fell victim to a serial killer who is roving around the country, hatcheting people to death. And then 6 weeks later, you've got Rose and Roger killed, and basically Roger's killed in the identical manner. These two other males found in his underwear, slight differences, and I think that's due to the two victims versus one. And then we have toothpaste squirted in all three cases. This is the same offender. Those of us that have been in this field for a long time, I absolutely understand how everything happened back in the day. What's important is from this point on, let's do it right, and let's see if we can't solve this thing.
Then he pulled up beside a dumpster, and he said that he had a rotten watermelon in his trunk that he wanted to get rid of in case those investigators wanted to search his car. Stupid me, I stayed in the car. I didn't get out to see what he was throwing in, or, I wasn't questioning him at that time. Anyway, whatever he threw in the dumpster, he did.
Another person that was a suspect was the bartender that worked in the motel that evening.
To me, they gave me the impression of, well, she got what she deserved, and nobody deserves what she got.
The first time after they had it all ready to rent, it felt cold in that room. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in this room. But you would be surprised how many people would check in and want to stay in that room.
He got us in the room, and we looked around. It was just a very strange feeling, a very uneasy feeling, a very kind of even a scary feeling. I just really can't buy that it was a random killing, that somebody wandered off the highway and did this. I just don't believe that that's what happened. My top suspicion is somebody in the GTE phone company. There's 2 or 3 that were working in the phone company at the time that I think could have some motive, could possibly have done it. But I just assumed that he just really did not want to be associated with a person that had such a horrible background. It's a little bit hard to talk about it. Very shocked.
It really is a Missouri murder that happens in Iowa. So the relationships, the relatives, everybody that these two victims dealt with on a daily basis weren't from here. And so when you talk about motive, there are motives that certainly exist, but they existed in Missouri, not in Iowa. I don't have any evidence that she was actually in a cult, but for some reason she was taking some kind of interest in those types of things, and she had some things that were written in her notes that were dealing with satanic rituals. And
I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. It's like, what do you say to that?
There's always that chance that this DNA belongs to somebody else, and somebody that's not involved in the crime. And that's something you have to realize. Could the DNA have been put there on that towel before the blood, or maybe even after, through some sort of mistake by someone? Maybe none of these people in St. Joseph did it. And that's just one more indication of how crazy this case is, where you have all these reasons why someone might want to kill Roger and Rose, and yet none of them did it, and it's somebody completely unrelated.